All right, peace, family. You're tuning into the pro-black perspective on KWAZ Radio. Today we have two esteemed guests, well, three really, but we have two esteemed guests, and we're going to discuss the chapters 8 and 9 of Yurugu. This was a big reading, and if the people within the discussion want to tell us, what their general feelings of the chapters were, we can do that before we get started. So, anybody have any opinions on the chapters read? Kanku, Sicily?
Yeah, this chapters 8, especially in the section that you highlighted, is when Dr. Ali gets deep into the the psychology and the science of whiteness, and gets into the differences between what is considered European and then what's what comprises everybody else almost. And so she introduces the melanin science here, and it's significant.
Yeah. This chapter, unfortunately for the people at home, if you I usually try to read a little section here and there, but there's this section between 440 and 480 that is Munemba Ani describing the different theories of why whites have this racism toward us, and just investigating five different theories, but each of them very valid, each of them very detailed, each of them very comprehensive. It's just a marvel, and you don't want to miss out on it. We're going to try to talk a little bit about it, but obviously I can't just read 40 pages on the air. I could read a few pages, and so with that being said, I want to jump right to page 413, um, and then we can go from there. Obviously, the same format. And also, I want to thank everybody who reached out to me and told me that they like this program. I mean, I had one tweet in particular that said, this was a good thing. So shout out to them. And it was in my DMs and all that, but it was still significant. So appreciate that. And of course, if anybody wants to, you can join the Discord and we can have the conversation forward. Also, just a heads up to everybody, we won't have the this program next week, but we'll have it the following week, and then we'll be finishing the book. So you will have time to finish the book, or at least read chapter 10 and finish the book with us. But all right, let's say page 413. It starts off with the chimera of legality that inevitably accompanies the most brutal and immoral acts of European imperialistic expansion is difficult for those from different cultural traditions to understand. Again, it can be understood only as it relates to the complex, atypical character of the European system of values. Dishonesty and hypocrisy is dealing with the cultural other is the norm for European behavior. This behavior is not negatively sanctioned within the culture. Indeed, it is expressly for such interactions that the rhetorical ethic exists. This style of behavior is also strange from the point of view of other cultures, that their participants find it difficult to believe that deceit and fraud are to be expected, that it represents the rule and not the exception in the Europeans' behavior towards them. As a prelude in his sadistically brutal behavior towards Africans in Central Africa, Leopold of Belgium formed the International African Association, avowedly to be concerned with the well-being of the indigenous African population. In a conference held in West Africa in 1884, the European powers gave to this organization lands in Central Africa. Chapman Cohen says the conference gave what it didn't belong to it in an association that had no claim to what it received. In August 1885, Leopold notified the signatories that his association would henceforth be known as the Congo Free State, and that he himself was monarch of the domain. Having thus legally and in a civilized manner usurped land that did not belong to him, he then proceeded to brutalize its inhabitants. This behavior fits the pattern of European behavior towards the cultural other. Leopold civilized the Africans by chopping off their hands. The enlightened Europeans, the Rockefellers, Morgans, and Guggenheims, thought such behavior uncalled for. They simply entrenched themselves in the Congo, vowing not to leave until the last drop of natural wealth was gone. They are still there. The following is a report from an American missionary on events in the Congo. It is blood-curdling to see them returning with hands of the slain, and to find the hands of young children amongst the bigger ones, evidencing their bravery. The rubber from this district has cost hundreds of lives, and the scenes I have witnessed, while unable to help the oppressed, have been almost enough to make me wish I were dead. The rubber traffic is steeped in blood, and if the natives were to rise and sweep every white person on the Upper Congo into eternity, that would still be left a fearful balance to their credit. A pattern of, a pattern of A part of the pattern is that stealing of land must be accompanied by treaties and agreements between the European and the native, which are meaningless in terms of the European ethic and invalid or immoral in terms of the traditional concepts of land tenure. The ancestral lands cannot be signed away. Everywhere we have the same story, obtaining conceptions from native chiefs under misleading pretexts or childish bribes or deliberate fraud. For Europeans, breaking such treaties is of course also the rule and is in no way punishable or disapproved of by European society. What deserves attention is the apparent need that Europeans have to legalize everything. In fact, their concept of legality itself bears scrutiny. It is this spurious cultural institution that victimizes those people unfortunate enough to get in the way of Europe's imperial stride. Such victims unfortunately confuse the concept with morality, but the ideas of legality and morality have little relationship in European ideology. Legality has to do with behavioral consistency and order, and is secularly sanctioned. Let me see, how far am I supposed to read this? Maybe it was. Let's see. I think maybe that might be enough. Well, let's just do this right here. But why do Europeans go to the trouble of creating the appearance of legality in their dealings with majority peoples? Why not simply steal and exploit without the charade? The answer is that this acting out constitutes a strategic tool that politically disarms the victims of European expansion, and it plays an important part in the maintenance and support of the European self-image. The importance of this self-image must not be underestimated. One of the deepest beliefs of the European is the related notion of civilization, progress, and the evolutionary superiority of their culture. This concept of codified law is a definitive ingredient of that civilization, for which civilization, according to European ideology, comes order, and legality assures lasting order. Not moral conduct, but consistent and predictable conduct. So that the civilized way, the European way, is bringing law, however forcibly, in the structures of European culture, civilization, to those whom one treats immorality and for whom one has no respect. Along with development, this justifies expansionism, for after all, Europeans bring law and order to people who must have previously lived quite disorderly lives, or so they believe. Good law is written law and therefore truly legal. Unwritten law is not really law. It is bad and backwards. How many times have the victims of European hypocrisy been duped into trying to deal with those laws rather than with the true nature of the European ethic? You know? I think that might be. I mean, maybe this other. Oh yes, she mentions Gaddafi. All right, let me just, because I wish I. All right, let's just do this. Let's do it. The stories begins with the Romans who blessed the world with their laws. Even now, that would be the greatest achievement. Who were the barbarians? Those who defied and ignored the laws. Who lived according to the other patterns? Who are the barbarians now? The skyjackers, kidnappers, and other terrorists, revolutionaries. We are told by the European press that their acts are uncivilized, and indeed their behavior poses a threat to European ideology. By refusing to relate to Western order, these individuals and armies disarm Europeans. They succeed in robbing them of a potent tool for psychological and ideological enslavement. To Reagan, Gaddafi is a mad dog who supports acts of terrorism against the free world, Euro-American interests. Therefore, Reagan could intentionally provoke Libya into a defensive attack by invading the Gulf of Sidra, 12 miles within Libya's coastline. Then, in retaliation, he could indiscriminately bomb the Libyan city of Tripoli, perhaps in an effort to assassinate Gaddafi. Reagan's act is called defending civilization, while Gaddafi is accused of supporting acts of terrorism. But those who are called terrorists by Europeans are people who have refused to accept the semantics of European ideology and the rules of European culture. In the view of these revolutionaries, Europeans are war criminals on trial for centuries of systematic exploitation, rape, and murder perpetrated against various majority peoples. Those whom the Europeans label terrorists understand that we are fools if we accept the warmongers' rules of war. If indeed we wish to destroy their power to defeat us, we must deny them the right to judge us and our behavior. Who is Reagan to define moral or even political terms for the world? Is it always a matter of the entire civilized community being shocked by these barbaric acts? It is the barbarian now, as in ancient Rome, who is the true revolutionary, if only in the sense that he poses the greatest threat to the European order. Those few who have come to understand the principles of the Europeans' attitudes and behavior towards the cultural other are considered to be paranoid, hateful, extreme, and violent by the rest who will relate to the European facade. Since European laws never work for the cultural other anyway, the best thing for non-Europeans to do is to ignore them. That was one of the lessons of the Mississippi experience that black people learned at the Democratic National Convention in 1964, much to the embarrassment of the Democratic Party, that its rules for the election of delegates were not meant to include Mississippi, that the whites of that state would be upheld in their attempt to exclude blacks, because to do otherwise would indeed upset the order of the convention. The separation of morality and law, the phenomenon of mass hypocrisy, the separation of emotional commitment from actions are all encouraged by the European tradition in the use of words without meaning. To be civilized is to be able to hide one's true motives, and civilization is the appearance of a moral order that does not exist. If these things are understood, then it is more easily realized that to be a cultural other implies that there are no laws that govern or inhibit the European's behavior towards you. When this becomes immediately apparent, it is the Europeans' overt behavior and this expression of violence and brutality. However, inadvertently, the freedom rides and sit-ins demonstrated that there was no conscience to be reached in white America, sensitive to physical brutality being enacted upon African people. In spite of the intended objective of appealing to the hypothetical conscience, if the nature of European ideology has been properly understood, the strategic error could never have been made. But again, perhaps it was a timely error, though it is difficult to imagine any gain worth those lost lives of the physical and emotional brutality suffered by a young and naively idealistic community. The gain, if any, is to be reckoned in the removal of the hypocritical veneer and disarming image that America had presented to the world. America's behavior towards people of African descent during the Southern movement revealed an ugly slice of the European ethic that was not meant to be shown. African descendants had, of course, long endured such brutality, but they had been invisible, i.e. hidden, within a conceptual construct that did not allow them to be seen as human. This revelation helped a few more victims of European brutality and exploitation to understand the implication of the European concept of the cultural other. Those few were accordingly able to radically alter their political strategy for the attainment of the self-determination that they sought. Okay, so how you guys doing? So what do you guys think about that section?
I have a question. I know you guys at least remember when Gaddafi was murdered. And if you recall, at that time, this was the overriding statement you would hear from people. But he's killing his own people. And I even met some students who were living and who were, you know, not a lot, but maybe two that I had a chance to meet. And they were saying that they had a family member that was tortured and killed by the Gaddafi regime, and they were using that as a, you know, justification for agreeing with the NATO and the U.S. move to invade Libya at that time. And I was shocked that after Yurugu was written, you know, after we had examined all these regime changes and, you know, countless regime changes that the United States and the West, you know, forced on people all over the world, that we literally sat here and started using CNN talking points to justify anything that NATO was doing. I just want to, you know, reflect on the fact that this construct, this scenario was laid out very clearly by Dr. Ani. How did we end up in that position where many of us just kind of missed the memo? How? We still missing a memo in regards to Venezuela, Cuba, Israel. How?
Well, you know, and this is the rhetorical ethic. I mean, one how, obviously, I would say, if asked, like you said, is, you know, we actually don't study this book. We don't study this book, and even if we do study this book, people don't really like. Unfortunately, we're not of that culture. If I'm going to be honest, we're not of the culture where we even want to engage it. You know, I could actually admit or mention that there was this. Like I said, I told you the other day that there was this discussion on Twitter centered around this Christianity debate, right? And part of the Christianity debate was, yeah, I was actually there. You know, I was doing whatever. But I was kind of quoting more of Ani, right? And I'll be honest, you know, just quoting Rambani, I'm not even included in the debate, in the discussion. A lot of times, you know, and I mean that might not be the reason, right? There's probably more to it, but a lot of times you could see that the discussion is going to be centered around different opinions, but it's not going to be around scholarly work. Like, unfortunately for us, if the people who do study, or even so, this is something I noticed before, that if, like, when I was younger, I knew that there were people around me who read way more books than me. There's still people around me who read more books than me. They don't have any position in our communities on a broad scale. They do not have, there's no institution around any of these well-read individuals in our communities. In fact, I'll point this out too. There's not even a single university that's black-owned or wait, hold on. I'll finish. Black-owned in the sense of, like, African-centered, like we ourselves built it, you know, from scratch in any black, let's say, hood, right? Or any black, like any high concentrated black area. And I'll just limit it to America. But the reality is that if you go to these areas that we may congregate deeply, there's no real learning institutions. So the idea, like, there's no way that we will have this huge impact on our community on an intellectual level if we do not have those intellectual institutions in our communities. You know, so even if, you know, like for the most part, when we read Marimba Ani, right, we read it by ourselves. You know, we read a book, we read it by ourselves. We're not at all disseminating it. You know, this might be an attempt at disseminating Yurugu, but again, it's not going to be as popular.
Can I interject?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so I would say that we have to have the correct mindset first. When you open your eyes, like, first thing first, we are at war. Depending on how you see it, we are at war from like 400 years or 2000 years. So then when you realize that, you have to go back to the history. So what history teaches you, like, it's not like we don't have the structure, but I would say, like, just step in the 60s and 70s. We had like a community organization. When you look at the Black Panthers, when you look at the Nation of Islam, and all the movement from Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Stokely Carmichael, and so on. We had those institutions that were having impact on the communities. But what they did, we had the government put out COINTELPRO. So I guess this is like the main problem to answer Cicely. That's the problem. It's not like we don't know, but it's every time we rise, they chop off the head of the leaders. So this is for me the explanation, and each generation we have to kind of redo the same work. Now it's like easier with the internet, since like the internet doesn't forget, and we accumulated like so much work up to this point that now it's harder for them. But if you look back, we've been doing the work. It's just like we go from cycles to cycle.
Yeah,
that's the answer for me.
Yeah, that's what I would mean about the.
You know, there is such a.
Oh, sorry. That's what I would mean about the lack of institution. In fact, I think it was Bobby Wright. He said two things, right? So Bobby Wright does say that we have the people and they have the institutions. You know, like, we have the people, they have the institutions. Because the reality is this: that if you go and you kill the chancellor of the public school system, right? That's not going to change the public school system, because it's just an institution. You can't just kill a person and destroy something if they're institutions, right? The thing is that with regard to us, like, sure, we had a few institutions. they didn't have the financing or the reach of the public school system, which the public school system will, in fact, misinform you. And I want to say
this. An impact.
You said what?
Yet they had an impact.
Yeah, exactly. The people.
Yeah.
You could have an impact. Like just me talking to you or you talking to me is going to have an impact. You know, impact is something that's going to be had because humans impact each other. But the idea of an institution versus because like when I said that, you know, about the black area, we know that in a lot of black concentrated areas we'll have I think a nation of 5%. So we know that there are groups or organizations that are active in these areas. But there's a big difference between the scale of activity. You know, there's a big difference between, or even just to say that, hey, I put out a YouTube video and Beyonce puts out a YouTube video. There's a huge difference. But you know, we might both put out the same video. We might both be impactful. But obviously, you know, Beyonce or who is it now? Cardi B, right? They put out a video with 15 million views, jump. You know, it's played 15 times a day by certain individuals. You know, there's a difference. I want to say I did set an alarm. Oh no, it's not yet. So I forgot to mention I have this Hillary Clinton video, right? And the thing with it is that we're also not prepared. Like there's no way. Like deception is an art, and Wazungu knows that art. You know, I don't know how they know it, but they know it. And so, you know, after these 10 minutes or whatever, I want to play this Hillary Clinton video because when you hear it, the reality is this: that unless you know, right, what's going on, you're not going to know what's going on. You know, it sounds good. You know, it sounds reasonable. If you're in the West, it's the rhetorical. It's good though. It's like she got it. You know, she got it. You guys mind if I play it, or you guys anything else to say before I play it?
Let's hear it.
All right. Let me make sure the people at home could. Okay. All right. So let's play this video actually, because it's the rhetorical. It's like, oh sorry, it's rhetorical ethic on.
You know, there is such a continuing anxiety about upsetting the Chinese. And there are two big reasons for that. One, Henry Kissinger mentioned maybe some unintended consequence of war down the road somewhere, but also the economic issue. And here, it's time we recognize that we need to rebuild our own supply chains, even if that requires a certain level of subsidized industrial productivity. We cannot be dependent on the Chinese market. It's not only bad for our economies, it is bad for our geopolitical strategic interests. Look at what happened with the lack of personal protective equipment or certain pharmaceutical ingredients when the pandemic hit. We were at the mercy of China. Well, we cannot let that continue, and we need to work together across the Atlantic to figure out how we're going to take back production. Now, will it be as low cost? Of course not. And how do we set our tax systems and other arrangements so that there are incentives for our businesses to return to Western democracies to produce things? And I would add that more and more businesses are seeing that unless they are low-cost producers of retail clothing, which, you know, probably will never come back for all the obvious reasons, but if they are producing anything more sophisticated, increasingly the Chinese government, through coercion, through unfair regulation, through enforced partnerships or royalty agreements, is slowly stealing that intellectual property anyway. So I do think that we've got to get smarter about how we deal with the economic threat. And for people who say, oh, well, you know, that disrupts the market. China has disrupted the market. China is not a free market economy. We tried. We let them into the World Trade Organization. We sent our businesses over there. We made trade deals. They are a controlled, top-down economy. You will never compete and win against them unless you take back the means of production.
Yeah, okay, so Woo! I mean, like, shit.
I listened to this. I listened to this earlier in the week. I made some short comments about it.
Yeah, chill. You hear me? Yeah. So the thing is that what she said. Look, not reading Yurugu. If you were a white liberal or even a black liberal, right, makes sense. You know, in fact, when I put it on Twitter, somebody did say, "Hey, it makes a lot of sense. The Chinese are doing X, Y, Z, and look how they're doing stuff in Africa, and blah blah blah." But the thing is that's the trick. There was nothing there, right? That what she's saying is that, like, she uses their stealing technology. They're not a top-down economy, and because they're not a top-down economy, we should do some top-down economy, but we're not going to call it because we're free. We're free market. We want, like, it was almost, she's like, we need to subsidize our economy because we got to beat them. We got to compete with them. And who's we? The Western interest. She's saying white supremacy, but she doesn't say it.
She said we got to ally across the Atlantic.
Exactly. So she doesn't say white supremacy. And so because of that, you don't sit by, you don't think anything of it. You're like, hey, you know what? She's right. The Chinese are a threat. But they're stealing and they're doing it. Because just like when Sicily said something about Gaddafi torturing people. We saw George Floyd getting tortured and killed. I didn't watch the whole video, but I heard he cried out to his mother. And somebody sat on his neck regardless and killed him. In plain view. Nobody is advocating for any organization to destabilize and take over America, or to kill America's leaders over the brutality or whatever. So it's this rhetorical ethic that they can use it, because my thing is that the key word is ethics, right? And the reality is that if you can do something like you put in some moral words, the Chinese are stealing. They're not a free market economy. They're blah, blah, blah. And then people will sit by and say, you know what? We value free market. We value no theft. These guys are wrong. And then, you can't say anything. And I think Mirbadi's going to say that later about how one of the things you can't say in America or in the West is you can't be against progress. And yet, who represents progress? The Chinese don't. Even though they're kicking butt. Taking names. Anybody else have any comments on that video, or do you want to move forward?
No, it's a wild world out here, and I think you got my comment about us not being the proxy in this scenario, and that's exactly what's being set up, and this is why our continuous, holding on to this political naivete is deadly. Because at the end of it, you have the entire Western Eurasia against, let's say, Eastern Eurasia. Mm-hmm. Okay, and in that war, we don't want to be caught up in the middle. We don't want to be used as proxies, and that's what they're doing right now. And China literally has no choice because they can't get caught slipping by any means when they're dealing with such a huge threat. So using us. That's par for the course. Then we're caught up in this scenario where it's China good for Africa, it's China bad for Africa. That's not the damn point. Mm-hmm. The point is to build strength so that you're not used like a pawn between these two people or between these two entities.
There's a proverb in Africa that goes, when two elephants fight, I think it's like the grass suffers or something like that. But the reality is that you don't want to be the grass when the elephants are fighting. You want to be an elephant and you can watch them fight. You know what I mean? And you can fight the one that loses. That's all that there is to it. We have to focus on our own power. But like I said, there's going to be people in China, as far as China, who are going to hear that Hillary Clinton thing and say, she's reasonable. We shouldn't be a top-down economy. We should be a free market economy. And there's going to be people in China advocating for a free market economy because it sounds good. And they're going to be hurtful to the Chinese. Then guess what? China might subdue them, because that's what you would do if people are, because that's what COINTELPRO is, right? They're going to subdue those people, and then America's going to find some reasoning to be like, oh, well, look how they're killing their own citizens, or look how they're jailing these people who were advocating for free markets, because that's what they do. This is the playbook. This is the playbook. But
I mean, I just don't get how the playbook has been revealed yet. We still continue on. And I mean, I get it because the trickery, like you said, I mean, it's superb. You know, it works. That's why they're doing it.
exactly.
But I think my question was more or less looking to dissect the not so much the how it's being done, but how we can circumvent it. And I think, you know, bringing up the fact of institutions and systems versus people was, I think, a number one, you know,
Oh,
on the list.
that was another thing I
But
wanted to
there's
say.
other things that we need to do too.
That was another thing I wanted to say. Bobby
Yeah.
White. Wait, let me just say this quickly because I forgot about Bobby White. Bobby White also said that we have to notice about America is that we always talk about the '60s, but nobody talks about the '70s. You know, we talk about the '60s and nobody talks about the '70s. And the reason why nobody talks about the '70s is because the white people regrouped, or especially the white women regrouped, and they started saying, you know, it's not just a black struggle, it's a student struggle, it's a gay struggle, it's a woman struggle, and the whole black struggle was disseminated from that because now you have black folk who are like, you know what, I really have student interests, you know, like college loan, blah, blah, blah. Or you have black folk who are like, you know, really it's about the environment, blah, 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 blah. Or you have black folk who are like, you know, I'm gay and I'm actually oppressed and harassed and blah, blah, blah. And you have black folk who are like, you know, I'm a woman and this is doing it. And you have black people who are like, yeah, I'm a man and, you know, things are hard for me. So, or you know, prison reform or whatever. The point being that it was, you know, white folk tactically regrouped, re-strategized, said, you know what, we're going to, you know, obviously dilute the black supremacy, the white supremacy talk, and of course, you know, you have people like Hillary Clinton, where, you know, if like a black person could literally sit back and say, you know what, we have to support free market economies in the world, or we have to support intellectual rights in the world, and it's going to distract you if you can only put so much energy in, because a lot of us don't realize this, but you can only put so much energy in what's in front of you. You know, you only have 24 hours of the day, and like 8 of them should be towards sleeping. You cannot. You're going to be distracted. You have to focus. So
You can always use what you can see.
and that's another thing too. It's like even if this truth is revealed to us, that's another thing I want to say about with regard to this. Even if it's revealed to you or me, doesn't mean it's revealed to everybody. You know, and that's the thing that like actually an ancient African proverb goes that what ceases to be mysterious for you is only revealed to you. You know, or even what like the information is going to be new to you as if it was never been written, but it's been written. But people, we are not a highly literate or highly studied community in the sense of what we've written and what we've studied. You know. Even on Twitter, I'm just now realizing that Chia Wenzu. I've never even read Chia Wenzu. It's just sad. I want to read him, I guess, but you know, I'm reading what he's saying, and he sounds like great Garveyite, great, you know, Nyere, all that kind of sounds like the stuff I'm talking about, and I haven't even read it. But I've been to.
Who is that again? You say you haven't read?
Chia Wenzu.
Oh, Chinwezu, yeah, Dr. Chinwezu.
Yeah. But all right. Anybody else have any comments before we go to the next one? I know I cut off Kanku. Sorry.
I wanted to. I don't really know if it's really the fact that we don't read or whatever. I guess there is a great deal that we can attribute to the personality. Like we cannot ignore that when they do such stuff, they also how to say, they manage to put you in a position not to add your force, not to join force into the struggle. They give you a salary for this reason, like to say, oh, I won't complain because, you know, I'm just like above the water. My head is above the water. I can barely pay my rent, barely pay my food, and so on. So I just keep on.
Sorry, I think you cut out. Can you guys hear him?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, Kanko, you cut out. Okay, so all right, we'll go on. You know, hopefully he can still hear us. I hope so. But we'll go on to the next one. And then, you know, when he comes back, you can finish. 431, page 431. All right. You guys got there? Kanku, can you hear us? Try to sign out and sign back in. Sometimes that happens. Well, not usually, but sometimes that happens. The determining factor in the Europeans' behavior towards those outside her culture is the driving power theme that dominates her ideology. It underlies their fanatical rationalism, their lack of spirituality, their obsession with the material and technical, and their imperialistic expansionism. The cultural other becomes the object of the most extreme manifestations of this power drive and a necessary component of the European worldview. This helps us to understand why the object of cultural violence or cultural aggression is never the transformation of the cultural other into a European. Into a European. This is why Ghanaians with a British accent is an object of ridicule for the European. The Ultima Rojo does not demand the creation of more Europeans. It needs instead the cultural other to fulfill the role of object. Cultural destruction is therefore achieved by convincing people of other cultures that they are in fact destined or created to be controlled by Europeans, or what is equally harmful, convincing them that they can become European, an ethological racial impossibility. The latter is the ideological basis for the creation of the African elite that Chienwezu and Owunor discuss as primary banes of African self-determination. Cultural destruction is successful when majority people accept the definitions of themselves given them with the terms of European ideology. Chienwezu vividly describes the civilizing process as he experienced it, i.e. a process of miseducation. It was a miseducation process which, by encouraging me to glorify all things European and by teaching me a low esteem for and negative attitude towards things African, sought to cultivate in me that kind of inferiority complex which drives a perfectly fine right foot to strive to mutilate itself into a left foot. It was a miseducation full of gaps and misleading pictures. It sought thereby to indoctrinate me with the colonizer's ideology. It sought to structure my eyes to see the world in the imperialist ways of seeing the world. It sought to internalize in my consciousness the values of the colonizers. The motivating factor underlying European cultural aggression appears to be the power drive, which is fully acted out on the cultural other. This is often quite literally and dramatically the case. It is not merely a subtle implication of their cultural behavior. In 1816, a community of Africans who had escaped from white slavers and who were living a quite peaceful, constructive, and culturally coherent existence in Florida were attacked by a unit under the command of General Gaines of the United States Army. They were subsequently slaughtered. In 1945, the U.S. government was capable of destroying 2 Japanese cities, wreaking unprecedented destruction and pain in a single act of violence with the object of displaying its newly acquired power to the world. The Japanese people were regarded as mice in a scientist's laboratory or as mannequins in a store window. Okay. Kanko, you back?
Yes,
okay.
I'm back.
Okay, good. All right, so what do you guys think about that section? That was, it was shorter than before, but what do you guys think? I'm going to put the timer on.
You know what I thought about when I was reading this section? I went to a school that used the Fighting Illini, which is a group of Native Americans who lived in the Midwestern area. And I remember being in college and somebody just brought up the fact that here we are standing on these people's land, you know, at this point, just doing whatever it is that we're doing. And most of them have been decimated. And then to just to drive the point home, they have the nerve to use their ancient, you know, symbolism as a mascot for a school and call it the Fighting Illini. So now we're big up in the fact that these people tried to fight the hell out of the Europeans. It wasn't like they just came in and walked over the land and took it. You know, you know, it was a battle. And in that battle, they're regarding the natives as fighters, okay, and giving them high regard. But in doing so, they big up themselves because after everything, they crushed them and took over their land. So, in a sense, the mannequin and the mascot and the mice in the laboratory all represent what she's really going for in this section, is to explain they never went for complete extermination because, they never went for complete extermination because they actually need the reinforcement of the fact that they oppressed and just took what they wanted from whatever group that it was. So, in fact, the ones of us that have survived this onslaught are just representatives of European destructive power, which is something that they're quite proud of.
They are proud.
So that's what I thought about.
So here's this right here, matter of fact. You remind me of something right now. So in America, you know, there's this ice cream trucks, okay? Ice cream trucks play this song. It goes, right? That song, the tune is called Old Zip Coon, right? And the whole premise of this song, Old Zip Coon, right, is it's a white person singing about making fun of a black person who's trying to act like a white person. So we unfortunately call people coons, right? We're like, oh, that's a coon. You're a coon, boy, coon. That is an insult that white people made for black people who were trying to act like white people, but they were like illiterate and didn't dress properly, and they ate like frogs instead of, you know, normal food. And it's like, this is, and so they are mocking you for trying to be for trying to be like they're mocking the Ghanaian for the British accent. They're mocking the African American for dressing in a two-piece or whatever. You know, this is what they do. This is how it is, and this is partly why, unfortunately, that they keep us around. You know, the shucking and jiving is something. You know, the entertainment. You know, what are we in America? We are the ball players, the musicians, the singers. We are the defeated people who sing the blues. You know, so that they can
the entertainment, literally.
Basketball, music. We're there to and the thing is this: the entertainment form that we use is almost, you know, is more flavor than theirs, obviously, but it's a facsimile of theirs. You know, it's not like we are, you know, straight up doing, and even if we were doing what we did on the continent, right, it would still be, you know, like they used to bring black people from the continent and put them in zoos and say, look at that, you know, here's a primitive, you know, pygmy or whatever, you know, who's a noble fountain of civilization. They reduce them to, you know, oh, here's somebody, a plaything. This is what they are. They're an object. And if they try to act like us, we're going to laugh. You know, it's horrible, but. You know, like we have to see it for what it is, and you know, like you said, you know, I think Kanku made a good point earlier about how, realistically speaking, you know, we can't help but be the entertainment. You know, even like we know being entertainment is not a good thing, but you know, the economy is shaped such that what are we gonna do? You know, like we can't what? Well, sorry, when you said about the Native Americans, I was reminded of, and I wanted people to see at home, if they could, this image of the buffalo heads. You know, like apparently white people like slaughtered like 150 million buffaloes in their conquest of the Native Americans. Partly because they understood that if you had like a buffalo, if you could, like if you have buffaloes and water and forests, you know, you don't need to go into the city. You know, because the buffalo could give you clothes, it could give you food, it could give you shelter, you know, whatever. You have water, you could drink, you have the forest, you could eat fruits, you could build stuff. If you have all of this, you have no reason to go to the city. And not just that, white people don't even have a reason to be in the city. You don't have any reason to go to no mine. And this is what they always do. This is the tactic that they always do. They take you away from the land and they make it so that, unlike other animals, you have to pay to survive. You have to pay another individual to survive. This is what they do. And because you have to now pay another individual to survive, that means you have to work for them at their cost, at their rate. And then you could lose your life working for them. But the point is that now you can't do anything because your survival, you're dependent on other people, and they're telling you, hey, you know what? And they're making you believe that they are the civilized person. I don't want to harp too much, but I'm reminded of that joke. If y'all remember the Native American joke, where There's allegedly a Native American joke where he says, before the white man came, we had to, men could like hunt all day, play games all day, and then go home and sleep with their woman, all night, and then they could eat food wherever they want, they could drink wherever they want, they could blah blah. And the white man was stupid enough to believe he could improve that. But the thing is that yes, because the difference is that he can now exploit you, he can now use you, and this is what he did in Africa. He took us from our best land, and he gave us nothing. And anyway, but this is something that everybody should know. But again, if they don't, hopefully you benefited from that. Anyone else have any comments on that?
I think it would be good if we had a study guide. We need a study guide for this book and the patterns that she's outlining. She does a lot with the charts in Yurugu, but there's certain patterns and the examples that would be really clear illustrations of those patterns. So it would be good if, I don't know how, but that would be work for a nice black think tank, to just kind of put it together so that we could take those patterns and place it up against current geopolitical events and occurrences and see things for what they are. Because right now, with the propaganda onslaught, our view is and the continuous miseducation, of course our view is skewed. So it would be nice to break this down, use the charts that she has in the book, and even create some more to really help illustrate some of these patterns. Because we're in a loop, man. How could you read this and find yourself in the middle of a street protest with no short and long term goals? But we're doing it.
I was actually thinking about writing. When I started the book, I thought I was like, maybe we could do like Yurugu for kids, like summarize it, but it ain't no kids book.
I swear it occurred to me too, because we're sitting here now trying to figure out how can I break this book down, because I want to share it with my children too.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, I don't know. After that 440, I was like, sure, I don't know how we gonna do that. This book is deep. You know what I mean? But yeah, I agree with that. I wish there was something, but hopefully what could happen.
I would say like the ancestors did. What is our culture? It's like we sing, we put life in songs. We tell stories. So probably we should narrate it like a little story for kids and stuff like this, but it's not my job, so I don't know where to start. But I guess for me, we already have everything we need to fight back. It's just we have to have the courage to use those tools and use them as weapons, actually.
Yeah. Sure. I was told that my voice is muffled. You guys hear? Is my audio muffled? A little?
I hear you fine.
No, is mine muffled?
No, I don't think so. But all right.
I hear you fine.
Okay, because maybe the audio is not picking up on YouTube too well, which is, it sucks, but it is what it is. By the way, if people wanted to, they can join the Discord, and if you want to mute yourself, that's fine.
Did you share the link on Twitter? I don't think.
Oh, you know what? No, I didn't. But it is what it is. I told people to subscribe. Sometimes you gotta just, I remember somebody, like sometimes you gotta do the work. You gotta do the work you need to do. You know what I mean? I told them to subscribe. They don't want to do that. It is what it is.
No, don't take it like this, because look at what Muzungu is doing. It's always like learning is repeating, so you have to keep on tell people the same stuff over and over.
Oh yeah, you're right, but I'm getting old, man. But I feel I'll try to be young again. But all right, let's see. 437 is the next one. Okay. Let me know when you guys are ready. Oh yeah, this one. Oh, I forgot it. I forgot this was in the book. But yeah, I wanted to get into this one. Actually, matter of fact, yeah, you guys are gonna like this at home. Everybody ready? So 437. This one is in the last 2 decades of the 20th century, the most discussed and thought about disease, without doubt, will be acquired immune deficiency syndromes, AIDS. Contrary to the projections of the medical establishment and the United States government, confusion is generated by and is reflective of the confusion of the European, American, and European scientists. If one keeps abreast of the information released by various agencies and experts, the pattern of contradiction, conflicting findings, and vagueness becomes obvious. The message is clear. They simply do not know what they are talking about. The public is told repeatedly there is no proven case in which AIDS has been transmitted by casual contact. Objects touched or handled by people with AIDS are not contaminated and need not be feared. The only possible exceptions are objects which might be contaminated with blood, especially razors, toothbrushes, tweezers. Don't worry, HTLV, the third, I guess, is an extremely fragile virus. Yet at the same time, we are told that it is the lenti or slow with an incubation period of 7 years. Statements abound such as, there is no evidence that, and there is only a small risk that, and it is not thought that. This phraseology is not the least reassuring. In May 1987, 3 nurses contracted AIDS, supposedly from accidents in which they touched contaminated blood samples. The point is that AIDS kills and that there is no known cure. With an incubation period of 7 years, Dr. Strecker doubles the figure. A person could be infected without knowing it or without others knowing it. This certainly limits the exact knowledge that medical science has of the disease. Therefore, most lay people, and justifiably so, are not willing to take chances with speculation, scientific or not. AIDS has been associated with the male homosexual community in the United States, which is by and large of European descent, but includes men of African and other non-European backgrounds. In 1985, 70 to 75% of the people with AIDS were homosexual or bisexual men. 17% were intravenous drug abusers. Hemophiliacs and other blood transfusion recipients are also at high risk for obvious reasons. The retrovirus, or AIDS-causing virus, is said to be present in the bloody fluids, blood, semen, saliva of people who are infected. The virus is transmitted through exchange of bodily fluids. What does all this mean from the African-centrist perspective, and how it relates to the European behavior towards others? Suddenly, Africa emerged as the probable birthplace of the AIDS virus. Experts on talk show focused on AIDS would briefly make statements to this effect and then quickly move on to another point, never giving evidence to support such a conclusion. Homosexuality is not associated with African civilization, since African cultural values placed priority on female-male conjugal relationship as the basis of the extended family and for the procreation of children. If the experts get around this, AIDS in Africa is a heterosexual disease, and the virus has a slightly different chemical composition. They begin to talk about the green monkey as somehow being associated with the contracting of AIDS. In the minds of the American public were conjured pictures of bizarre practices in which Africans had sex with monkeys. Later it was clarified that STLV3 as for simian were carried by monkeys, but they did not die from it, and that Africans could have gotten it from eating the monkeys or being bitten by them. As of August 5th, 1987, the World Health Organization, right, who figures for known AIDS cases worldwide were 54,661 overall, 38,160 in the United States, and only 4,714 in Africa. That is one reality. But on ABC's Nightline, a very different reality was created for the American public. On Wednesday night, May 13th, 1987, when the figures for Africa were even less, Ted Koppel, with Dr. Milton Silverman, Renee Sabatier, and George Strait, assaulted the international African community. The gun barrels had been reloaded. The parallels with the Tuskegee experiment were striking in terms of the association, arguments, and images that were presented. To a mind trained to recognize patterns of European cultural political behavior towards others, the game plan was clear. People of African descent were being set up as objects of justified genocidal behavior by people of European descent. Our minds were being prepared to accept the self-fulfilling prophecy that by 1992, 5.5 million people would be infected in the motherland, and that men, women, and children of the African descent in the United States would be the largest group at risk. This program began with a visual focus on people suffering and dying from AIDS in Africa. At least we were told that the disease's question was AIDS. Mothers were shown wasting away with their children around them. Projections were made of rapid growth in the number of AIDS cases in Africa by the year 2000. The number of people already infected with the AIDS virus was estimated to be 10 million. The picture was one of disaster. Why did the future look so bleak for Africa? The experts said because of cultural differences, lack of communication, lack of television sets, sexual practices, polygamy, and the fact that Africans like to have children. The premise was that the threat of AIDS could be controlled by their better public understanding. The association was clearly made between AIDS and sexual promiscuity. The inference was that African culture in general, and the practice of polygamy in particular, condoned sexual promiscuity as well as undisciplined behavior with regard to sexual relations. It does not matter that polygyny, is not the predominant form of marriage in Africa, nor that it involves a controlled situation of sexual relations. It does not matter that the African value system placed on having children does not raise the degree of sexual promiscuity. Africans also value stable family situations that provide cultural and emotional support for children. It does not matter that traditional African culture is extremely disciplined compared with contemporary American society. Morally ordered, kin-based, and spiritually based construct. None of these realities that abound in anthropological descriptions were made visible. Instead, a white woman was shown teaching a co-educational group of 15-year-old Africans how to use condoms. It does not matter that both homosexual and heterosexual prostitution was introduced by Europeans into Africa, or that moral discipline breaks down with Europeanization. Let me just see if it is. Yeah, okay. I think that might be enough. So, I mean, obviously, people at home, the link, it might be in the description. You could read the link in the description. But I think, yeah. She does go into the numbers. And I do want to go into the numbers of how many AIDS cases there are. So let's keep going. The conclusion reached was that since it would be difficult for all the reasons listed above for European experts to communicate with the afflicted Africans so that the behavior could be modified through an understanding of the problem, AIDS could be expected to spread at an alarming rate throughout Africa. AIDS means death. We must remember that as we listen to these arguments, according to the program, women with AIDS were not told that they had AIDS. In this case, supposedly for their own protection, which hardly sounds like a program of education. The protection program is another interesting parallel with the Tuskegee experiment. In their capacity as saviors, they are now experimenting with Africans who are desperate. Dr. Daniel Zegeri, a French physician, had been experimenting in Zaire. The program portrayed his experiment as being highly secret, but most probably involving the injection of purified AIDS virus into the human beings in order to stimulate the immune system. Could that be done to Europeans? The answer is no, only to the cultural other. That was the prognosis for Africa, with actually only about 4,714 known cases, with 43 countries reporting. By 1992, there were reportedly 5.5 million people infected in Africa. And what about the outlook for the United States, with about 38,160 known AIDS causes? According to Silverman, we can actually be optimistic about the figure of AIDS in the United States. Why? Because in America, people can be educated. They can be reached through the media, 2 or 3 televisions in every home, and their behavior can be modified. How does he know? Because the male homosexual community in the United States had already, according to Silverman and Sabatier, responded to education about the disease and demonstrated that it's possible to consciously change sexual practices through an understanding of the implications of AIDS. Americans have cause for hope, but does that include all of those who live within its boundaries? Ted Koppel raised the question. You talk about polygamy in Africa, but there's casual sex in the United States. Note the incorrect association between polygamy and casual sex. Silverman never answered Koppel's implied question, but what he did say parallels the position taken by the medical establishment as far back as 1913 with regard to black people. Silverman said, I didn't say we wouldn't have some problems. There are a number, there are the inner city youths, the minorities, the blacks and Hispanics, who must come to grips with what we are saying, what the drug addicts. The message is clear, just as it was in 1932 when the Tuskegee experiment was initiated. Control comes with education and change. European Americans, male homosexuals, can be educated. Blacks and Latinos cannot. AIDS among male homosexuals will be contained. AIDS among blacks and Latinos will spread. Magically, everything is reversed. The percentage of known AIDS cases is highest among male homosexuals, but in the future we can expect it to be highest among blacks and Latinos across the board. If AIDS is associated with sexual promiscuity, undisciplined behavior, cultural differences, different from what, and ignorance, then what does this imply about blacks and Latinos? People of African descent are being set up as a victim who victimize themselves, who because of their own inadequacies can expect to be ravaged by a killer disease. Let's see. I think that's probably enough. Yeah, it's probably enough. All right. So, what are you guys' thoughts on that? I mean, you know, guys and gals. What are your thoughts on that? Anybody there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So I can't hear you right now, but what I would say about that is, yeah, that's I mean, eventually, I think I'm going to read the other section, which is also critical about how people in Kenya might have found a cure and we don't know about it. But this is something that it kind of parallels with the WHO involved. It kind of parallels this whole coronavirus thing. You know, I think actually I'm going to admit I feel like there was a part of this book where she outlines who is catching the AIDS and where the WHO organizations are, you know, or sorry, I'm repeating, but what people were catching the AIDS and what people were and like where it's mostly focused in Africa versus who's getting it and where the WHO organization is, you know, basically she's kind of implying. I think it's actually on this page. Let me see if I plan on reading this page. It might be that I'm planning on reading it, so I won't go into it right now. All right, yeah, so, yeah. I plan on reading page 444. I think it's on page 443, so I can just backtrack. But that's the gist of it. It's like, even the coronavirus, which I'm not entertaining conspiracy theory. I'm not going to say there's whatever. But it's pretty interesting, because I didn't even notice about AIDS, that when it came out, like 70% of it was in the white male homosexual population. Then I went to go look up what are the numbers now, and it is in fact ravaging Africa. You know, it is in fact ravaging Africa. There's no logical reason. There's no logical connection between the homosexuals in Los Angeles, right, and the people in Namibia. You know, there's no real connection. And yet, that's what we are. That's what we're talking. It's, you know, I understand if nobody has anything to say. You know what I mean? like I understand if nobody has anything to say. I wanted to read it for the people at home, but I understand.
Now I kind of came of age during the middle of this particular part of the war, and I honestly feel like at this point in the book, it's almost a call to arms because now you're dealing with. She goes into the syphilis experiment.
Oh yeah.
There's been a lot of experiments against us, against our, you know, humanity. What makes the syphilis experiment stand out is the fact that it went on for decades. So you're talking about a group of people who have both the capacity to carry out genocidal acts. They have the motivation. They're motivated biologically and culturally to carry out genocidal acts. They have the technology to carry out this warfare on a large scale, and they have used it before. So there's no conspiracy theory. you don't need one. All the other parts are
I have to say, Cicely, you have like conspiracy theories and conspiracy facts. That's all.
No,
and this one is a fact.
Is that conspiracy fact? You know, sorry, conspiracy practice. Because the thing is this, they are conspiring. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
We agree on the word conspiring.
You know what I'm saying? Like, they are conspiring. Nobody gonna say they not. You know, but that's what I'm like. It's just terrible because it's like, you know, the fear of the AIDS virus is something that shapes, I hope, a lot of us today. But you know, just to see this thing unfolding, because like when I started reading it, you know, you kind of when you're hearing it, you're like, this does sound outdated. I feel like we know more about it now. But realistically speaking, I appreciate that it was written at that time and the information as it was coming was there because we didn't know. I mean, we don't know. It's unfortunate there's so much information back then, and yet, like we still have so little information. It would be it would be amazing. I think like I agree with Cicely in the sense that yeah, we should somehow disseminate this better. Hopefully, like I chose these nice passages. I'm telling people, hey, share this video, share this video with other people because this is at best this is probably the most effective way I could think of. There's also remember Ani. For those who don't know, remember Ani also has a lecture series. I haven't watched it because it was like 10 hours, but maybe I'll watch it after this, you know? Because this is 10 hours too. You know, but it is what it is. Anybody else have any other comments? Because we can go to the next one. All right, we'll go to the next one.
Yes.
So, I'm going to go, I was going to read page 444, but I'll go to 443, right? Because it touches on this thing a little further. So she says, let's see where we can go. All right, so if the who, oh yeah, okay. So she starts off with this. This is pretty interesting. So somebody else writes, who is reported to have written in their bulletin that an attempt should be made to see if viruses can in fact. All right, hold on a second. Let me just tell this kid. He's having fun by himself. All right. WHO Health Organization is reported to have written in their bulletin that an attempt should be made to see if viruses can in fact exert selective effects on immune function. The possibility should be looked into that the immune response to the virus itself may be impaired if the infecting virus damages more or less selectively the cell responding to the virus, right? So AIDS does just that. It destroys the T-cell system of infected human beings. Dr. Strecker claims that the AIDS virus resembles bovine virus in cattle and the Vesna virus in sheep. He does not believe that it is related to the green monkey. According to Strecker, if the bovine and Vesna viruses are crossed, AIDS is the result. Experiments have for a long time taken place in which animal viruses are grown in human tissues. If the WHO had been successful in creating the virus that they have evidently called for, how would they test it? And how would they use it? Clearly knowing what we do about the white supremacy and European nationalistic ideology, the guinea pigs would not be Europeans, and if they were, they would be expendable Europeans. In the numbers game, it is very important to understand that people who prefer to have sexual relations with their own gender are likely to produce very few offspring, if any. Therefore, AIDS would most likely be introduced in African populations, their descendants, other majority peoples, and European homosexuals. It is reported that a front page article in the Times of London, May 11, 1987, makes the connection between centers established by the WHO, ostensibly to vaccinate people against smallpox, and the locations, date, and places in which AIDS first broke out. They are the same. Africa, Haiti, Brazil, Japan. In addition, 15,000 Haitians were working in Africa during the vaccination project and participated in it. As for the male homosexual community, the connection was made via the injection of homosexual men with hepatitis B vaccine in a program in New York in 1978 and in San Francisco in 1980. The hepatitis B vaccine study limited itself to males between the ages of 20 and 40 who were not monogamous. AIDS can live outside of the body, and AIDS virus can be carried by a mosquito. These are claims for which Strecker makes rather convincing arguments. If what Strecker and Douglas say is true, safe sex will not prevent AIDS. All the education in the world will not prevent or control an AIDS epidemic. An AIDS vaccine can never be discovered because AIDS changes. It is estimated that there are 9,000 possible kinds of AIDS viruses. It appears to be spontaneously mutate and recombine. To develop smallpox vaccines, scabs are taken from cattle infected with the disease. The bovine virus could have been in the vaccine used in Africa and other areas in 1971 for people inoculated in the WHO project. It could have been accidental. If so, what a costly error. It could also have been intentional, since the creation of such a deadly disease is consistent with the rationale for biochemical warfare and with the European megalomania. There is also a theory that AIDS was introduced in polio vaccine. See Rolling Stones, March 19, 1992. The only mistake made by the mad European scientists this time may have been losing control of the disease. It is therefore threatens to destroy those who it was intended to serve, but ultimately, such are the implications of the European asili. Dr. Barbara Justice, a New York surgeon of African descent, believes, 1, the AIDS virus has been adapted to melanin and is related to the experiment in 1951 with the death of a diasporic African patient, Henrietta Last, in which European scientists were able to grow viruses outside of the body in her cells after she had died. 2, the purpose of AIDS is to clean out the European gene pool, i.e. to eliminate undesirables, Africans, and homosexuals. as well as to finally capture the continent on Africa by destroying its present indigenous population. She refers us to the work of Jack Felder and Alan Cantwell Jr. This way. In 1989, African scientists in Kenya, after years of research, developed a possible cure for AIDS based on interferons. Its success attracted pharmaceutical companies, and together they are now manufacturing a product known as Kemron. In July 1990, an international conference were held in Kenya at KEMRI, the Kenyan Medical Research Institute, to announce what they said was a tremendous breakthrough. According to Dr. D. Koch and Dr. A. Obal, writing in the East African Medical Journal, 199 symptomatic and 5 asymptomatic patients seropositive for the human immunodeficiency virus type 1, HIV-1, were treated with Kemron, natural human interferon alpha, stabilized in a complex polysaccharide carrier. And I said that wrong, okay. Treatments were given for at least 10 weeks of a daily oral dose of approximately 20 IU of NHIFA per kilogram body weight. Karnofsky performance scores increased from an average of 60.5 on entry into the study to 100 by the 10th week after treatment. Similarly, common clinical complaints associated with HIV-1 infection rapidly reduced per patient from an average of 3.8 to 0.05 and 0 by week 8 and 10 of treatment. 18 of the patients seroconverted by both ELISA and Western blot assays during the study period. These observations suggest that Kemron used as recommended is beneficial in HIV seropositive individuals. While this was obviously an event of enormous universal significance, no European American media personnel attended the conference. This fact demonstrates the relationship between the European genocidal enterprise against African people, white and Western nationalism, and European self-image and image of others, which we have discussed in Chapter 4 and 5. The idea of African scientists discovering a cure for a disease that threatens to destroy the world's human population is such an anathema to a positive, functional European self-image that the Kenyans cannot be given credit, nor could pictures appear of the African scientists in the European American media. We must remember that these are, according to Europeans, the same people who are too ignorant and backwards to understand the nature of the disease. The United States media did not report Kemron until it felt comfortable discussing the controversy in which it was embroiled. At the same time, Kemron is being discredited. European scientists are working with interferons in the hopes of implementing an AIDS cure, and a Europe-American physician from Texas is claiming to have created it, so that African people still lose, for the manufacture, distribution, and ownership of interferons is denied us. Anyway, so I think that's enough. Okay. Yeah. All right. So anybody have any comments on that? Unless you guys want me to read further, but unless you guys.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead again and just try to. I'm just looking at the current geopolitical reality right now with COVID, and I'm not a doctor, and I never wanted to be one, but you have to look very, very hard before you accept a vaccination. Coming from Pfizer, Moderna, or any of those multinational companies. You cannot overlook the overwhelming evidence of continuous barbaric experimentation against our African DNA. You can't deny it. So you always have to ask questions. I've seen so much just nasty things said about, you're anti-vaxxer or stupid people, non-scientific. This is all part of the pattern that Dr. Ani is lining out in this book. This is a pattern. We have seen it before. How can you continuously deny what it is that you have experienced and seen in your own families, in our communities? So, you got to think about, when is the last time Pfizer did something to promote humanity? These are chemical warfare companies.
You ain't.
I mean, it's just you gotta put those thinking caps on. It ain't no easy answer, but it don't excuse us from asking the questions.
What? Like my thing is this. Real talk, right? When I need to get something that's mass produced or that I do not get it in the black community. You know what I mean? Like I go, I leave the black community. I go to a white, or I look for a black doctor. Like if it's a white doctor, or even like a white, like let's say if I'm eating fast food. If I'm going to eat fast food, I go into the fast food in the white area. You know what I mean? And the thing is that people know that if you let's say McDonald's, right? I don't eat McDonald's, but let's say I'm eating McDonald's, right? You know the McDonald's in the white area is better than McDonald's in the black area. You know what I mean? Like even though it's the same store, it's supposed to be uniform, you know it. And it's the same with that. Like if I'm going to find a doctor, I'm going to get a black doctor who, is about it. Or I'm definitely ain't going to get no white doctor in no black area. Because why are you in the black area? Like what are you doing in the area? Now, as far as actually, like you said, you don't, that's the thing. You don't want to be anti-science or whatever. But, at the same time, you cannot overlook the fact that, there were people, in fact, before I even knew about, before COVID or whatever, for instance, like you said, Pfizer. We know Pfizer was caught up with infecting black folk in some Western African country. Infecting black people to the point where children were being they developed mental disabilities among other things, but they developed it from the shots of Pfizer. And Pfizer was in this big lawsuit. We know that there were people who were deliberately injecting black people with AIDS and HIV. We know this. We know that South Africa was looking into something that could kill black folk, and we know that America, and we know that the disease, the AIDS virus, comes out in America, in the homosexual community. Doesn't even make it like what? And then, I mean, you want to be cautious, and because the reality is that there are people that you cannot trust. You have to trust people. Unfortunately, if you're living among them, you have to trust them, but you don't have to trust all of them. You have to trust some people. You have to if you walk like the thing I realized, I recognize is that when I cross the street, I'm trusting somebody's not going to run the red light and hit me over. One time I was actually, I was in college and I had a white classmate, and they were walking next to me, I guess, whatever. And then the light was green, and there was a car coming and it was going to slow down, and she just couldn't walk or whatever. And I was like, why are you not walking? And she said, one time she was walking and a car hit her. You know what I mean? You have to have certain amount of, you have to trust something because you're in this freaking city. You have to trust that the food is whatever, all that kind of stuff. But, where does it stop? Somebody did point out, look, even if you don't like Johnson & Johnson, the reality is that you probably have other Johnson & Johnson products. You probably, washing your hair or putting baby powder. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. It's unfortunate that we're in here, but this is why, if nothing else, nobody's going to say it. You've done it, Cicely, obviously, but, we have to repatriate, we have to build our own institution, we have to build our own separate, we have to have our own scientists. Because that's another thing, that was the most important thing about this one right here for me, is the fact that I never heard of these Kenyan scientists. They did this in 1989, this is 2021, this is 30 years later, or whatever, and never heard of them. Never heard of them. And why did we hear about them? Because of whatever, or because of these white folk don't want you to hear about them. They want to have this, well, we're the most forward. And it reminds me, the parallel I see is with the Madagascar, drink or whatever. Now, it was dismissed.
Yeah.
It was dismissed. It was
and even Stella, Dr. Stella too.
Oh, you mean the sister who was? Yeah, everything. If it comes, it's just there is an agenda. Now, obviously, there are real diseases. There are real consequences to, there's real consequences to ignorance. There's real consequences to being exposed to something. There's real consequences to catching this thing. There's real consequences to AIDS. There's real consequences to COVID. But we have to understand as well that the people in power have an agenda. We just heard Hillary Clinton, you know? And that's the thing that we didn't pick up on, we picked up on, but she hinted at war with China over this economic thing. She just name dropped, she said, oh yeah, well, Harry Kissinger was saying war, We have the people in power.
If the tables were turned and we were aggressively offensive, they're already sold on us in terms of they know what our intent is. That's why we're continuously at war, because they know that our intent is opposed to theirs. Let us see the day that we build the capacity to carry that intent and see how they will attack us. See will they sit down and conference up about it before the attack starts.
That's what she said too. And that's the thing too. It's like this. It's like she said. Remember Ani said it. She said there was a community in Florida living their best life, and the white folk attacked it. You understand? Same with Tulsa, Oklahoma. Living their best life, minding their damn business. The white folk attacked. The reality is that, if the people in power have an agenda and you know it, you just have to be mindful of it. You have to be mindful of it. And obviously, like I said, there is a real virus. There are real viruses. There are real illnesses out there. But the people who, like the people who go to become police officers it might be about security and safety, and some of them aren't. Some of them are about, getting access to women. Some are about killing black folk. Some are about getting away with murder. Some people are like that. And it's the same with doctors. There are some people who get into these medical positions not to help or whatever, because I'm not going to say it's all of them. You might luck out. But the reality is that, you might not. There are like I think I mentioned it before, there are women who go under anesthetics and then they wake up and they're like, I feel like I was molested. You understand? And they were going for like a surgery or whatever, and they feel like they were molested because they were. There are people who get caught like that. There are people who have, like, even if you're trying to play for a job, you might go for a job position and then you're in a building and you're kidnapped. Never heard from them again. There are people out there, and you have to be worried. It might not even be the vaccine, because anybody could switch it. You have to be mindful that that you're in you cannot just be blindly trusted. And I'll actually say this right here. And I'll tell you, one time I went to I went to the ATM machine, for a bank, right? I just stole my money somewhere, right? So I go there and I'm about to put my cash in, like I have cash and I'm gonna deposit, right? So I go to deposit, and this white man, I don't even know him. He's in the ATM machine too. Usually you don't expect the white guy to talk to you, but he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm just putting my mom to deposit my money." He's like, "I wouldn't trust that machine." You understand? I wouldn't trust that. I'll just wait for I'll go to a teller or something. This white guy don't trust other white people. He don't trust even white machines. Why would you? White people do not trust white people. The biggest people withholding from this vaccine are white people. No, I'm telling you, the biggest people that are not trying to do this vaccine are white people. They're making it seem like it's about us, right? But it really is white folk. Like the anti-vax thing, I've heard about the anti-vax a long time, okay? It was mostly white folk. Real talk, right? They don't trust them, but you do. It don't make no sense, and you got no reason to trust them. They got every reason to trust their own people. They people been looking out for each other from jump. They got every reason to trust their own people. They don't trust their own people. You don't trust your people.
It's not even good enough to go into their areas for services, because some of these things are offending us on a DNA level. Mm-hmm. I mean, certain medicines are, being geared. You see them working for other people, but they never work for people like you.
Dr. Africa.
Yeah. So, even with the fast food, I mean, it's garbage.
I feel you. I was just saying if you had a choice, you know what I'm saying? But like even Dr. Africa was saying that your melanin level also impacts like your physiological needs. Like you have a different physiology, so you have different physiological
Right.
needs. You know,
And things affect us in different ways.
even
And I
our
think
diets.
we are all apprised at this point. And for us to go around as though
Repatriate,
it's not a
separate.
consideration, it's almost like, as the Buddhists say, putting a sword in the hands of a coward. It's like you sit here with the most valuable weapon and you refuse to look at it, refuse to use it, refuse to learn about, what it can help you do. And yet here it is, people with barely any melanin. And they running straight game.
Straight game. So all right. So look here, fam. So I'm going to. We can't read this. I hear an echo. We can't read this, but this is going to be page 448 to 473. I'm just gonna scroll through it. I guess people at home, if you later on, you could rewatch the video, or you could, like I said, you can click the link. I don't know if the link's in the description, but on Discord you can find a section called Free Books and whatever, and you can see this because you can notice I'm reading a PDF, so you know that the PDF is freely available. I mean, you could obviously also Google search it, Yurugu PDF, and you'll probably find the same thing, or go on, LibGen or whatever. All right. So anyway, let's go. So she gives us pages 444 to 447 to 448 to 473 are her giving different descriptions of different philosophies regarding why white people are racist. Anybody want to comment on this section or anything that you want to read in particular?
I do have something that I'd like to hear from you guys about. Ani is trying to show us something here with the way that we use the word racism or any of the isms. So if you notice in the book, it's not like it's not heavily reliant on the theory of racism. Or any of those other isms. I mean, it's explaining things that we recognize and we traditionally recognize as racism, but she's trying to do something here with this. She's trying to show us that, actually, I'm not sure. I read it, but it is, did anybody pick up on that? And then, I'd like to get your take on it.
You mean about the? See, I never really advocated for the word racism myself. I thought. Well, I personally look at it like nationalism, but yeah, she's giving us different reasons as to why they have this behavior. Why they do with that to us with a cultural other, and I think that's really like the gist of it. Like what she's saying is that because I think that's what it is. We tend to when we say racism, we make it seem like it's about us. Exclusively, but it's really about them in a sense of they have this weird outlook of people that they don't see as themselves, what she calls the cultural other, and so how they view the cultural other, she's saying it's something more, it's just more of this, it's animosity, this xenophobia, and I mean, I think I honestly think that she justifies that well, It's better than what the liberals give us, which is, it's racism, and we got to get rid of the racism. Because again...
So she's using more of the term white nationalism than she is using racism. Is that what you are saying?
Well, what she's doing, that's what I'm saying I would do. What she's doing is she's talking about the cultural other, And I think, and how that's just how they are in terms of their acidity, like how they act, like it's inside of them to do something with the cultural other. And I think the example is seen pretty well in Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is not saying anything racist. Okay? She's talking about, but she's appealing to the culture that says that the cultural other, in this case the Chinese who don't play by the rules, who don't whatever, and you notice when she was talking about Reagan, it's like, why do people have to follow Reagan's rules? She's like, why do people have to follow Hillary Clinton's rules? But the reality is that she's looking at the cultural other, which here's the Chinese who aren't about free market, who aren't this. That's what she's doing. So it's just embedded in them to try to control the cultural other, and that's really what we would call racism, or what we are trained to call racism. But it's not. But it's bigger than that. It's bigger than race. It's realistically speaking, their sense of control. You know.
Yeah. So that's exactly how I understood it, and it's a recurrent theme throughout the book, because if something is to be remembered from the book, actually three things, but actually it's only one, as she puts it, it's asili, utama wadzo, and utama roho. So basically, the cultural seed, the DNA code of the culture, basically, that is the asili, and then the culture, the thought of the culture, the utamawazo, and the vital force of the culture. But for those later two items, those are just manifestation of the asili. And throughout the book, she explains the dynamic of it, of this asili, that is like the germ of the root cause of everything that we see, every behavior that they have, every like thought that they project is due to this cultural seed, this germ that gives birth to a lot of manifestation we see in the world, in what they do and everything. And that's basically for her, it's like what you were saying, but it's about like it's not racism, it's just like the cultural order. They have this tendency, and she said it like in the first chapters when she was saying that they need to objectify the reification of everything. They need like to, because they are detached they see themselves as detached from the universe, so they have to objectify everything, even other human beings or other like cultures. For them, it's like land basically, and that's with their like asili. That's why for them the cultural other is like a land that they need to conquer, they need to civilize and so on. So I guess that's how she explained racism, all the stuff, and that's why she doesn't like get caught up in those ism and schism.
I want to say, so just to clarify for people at home, she goes into Francis Caswell's theory. She goes into Cavell. Cavell was weird. I don't know why Cavell was included. She goes into.
Is Cavell black?
No, Cavell's a white man, definitely. Because ain't no black man talking about. So Cavell, for the people at home, Cavell's talking about like feces all the damn time, and it's just weird. It's like I don't care about this feces guy. But anyway, Bradley's another white guy. He used to tour with Dr. Clark. So him and Dr. Clark would have this section. But Bradley was talking about the Neanderthal part. Francis Caswell was talking about white people were motivated by their minority status. Cavell was talking about white people are motivated by the appreciation of whiteness and purity. Then she goes into, I think, Job a little later. Yeah, check out the Job. She goes well into the north.
Which one wrote the Iceman Inheritance?
That's Bradley. That's Michael Bradley.
Okay.
Yeah. So Job goes into Job's two cradle theory, and how white people were motivated by their poor environment, most so in the effects of that on their culture. And then of course she goes into I appreciate it because I actually have this guy's book. I just haven't read it yet. I think it's Richard King, and he goes into the melanin and how ancient Africans in Egypt. I thought that was really cool. If I was going to read anything, I was going to read that, but it wouldn't be fair to just read one of them. So, but how he's talking about how ancient Egypt, the blackness was appreciated, and we know that, and that melanin was appreciated, and how the black holes in the center of the universe, and blackness in the head and all that. It's so that was also a really interesting portion to explore. I think that was actually pretty much it. This right here, people, if you want to read this at home, definitely read that. I think that could be the gist of it.
Also, other
Yeah.
than the obvious Eurocentric additions that she pointed out in the section,
Oh yeah, combo.
I don't see any conflicts in like any real conflicts amongst all the theories. Like they all have parts that I just you can absolutely see that that was a factor.
Exactly.
So
I want to say she also had Kobe Kambon, and I think he was saying, oh yeah, about the nature and how white folk viewed themselves as like the pinnacle of nature, even though they weren't. They were like anti-nature, but it's just like it's so fascinating. I recommend, like, I almost feel like this would be something to read and examine all its own, but it was like 30 pages, so I was like, not today, you know. But anyway, we can go to a more official section. Let's just keep moving. What is that noise? So let's go. I think it's 478 we're going to go into. So 478 is probably going to touch on what we were talking about earlier. Hold on a second. 478, yeah, so this is the cultural other thing. So I just said this probably summarize the racism thing itself. So she goes, the isms of European ideology combine into one idea system that cloaks the sentiments of European cultural imperialism in a syntactical maze of universalistic terminology and logic. Each component of the system is dependent on a conception of the cultural other as the embodiment of the negation of value. For each provides the ideological function of supporting the European self-image as the universal agent of change, the doer, the personification of intelligence, and the inheritor of the earth. What follows is an equation of European collective behavior towards the collective other. So this is the European ideology. Christianity, right? The European self-image from that is the religious, moral, cultural beings. So then the cultural other is the images as a heathen, non-religious, immoral, and the cultural other must be saved, right? Now the same thing, you go fast forward in time. Now they're talking about the idea of progress. And they say, well, we are progressive, modern, cultural beings. And other people are backward, who need to be developed and advanced. Or you go to the evolutionarism idea. You know, we are civilized, cultural beings. And the other people are primitive, and they must be civilized. Or with the scientism, it's like, oh, we are scientists and knowers, and other people are objects, you know, like Tuskegee experiment. They're objects, so they must be studied, known, and controlled. And the last one, of course, would be white supremacy, where we are the white racial being, we are pure, and we are human, and other people are black and dirty and non-human, and they must be avoided, pitied, enslaved, and destroyed. And this is probably the root of racism. But let's go. She says, they must be understood that the ideas of saving, advancing, developing, civilizing, or studying do not indicate an identification with the cultural other or a desire to make her into a European. They all translate into the idea of control. They symbolize primarily and essentially a power relationship in which Europeans are supreme. Each ideological component contributes to the support of European imperialism and expansionism, because each ideologically supports the objective of power over others and attempts to transform European choices into inevitably and humanly desirable universals. The difference between the militarist and the missionary is only one of modus operandi. The blows of one are more physically apparent. Those of the other leave battered souls and cultures in their wake. Each ideological component contributes to the creation of an image of those who are different from the Europeans, which generates a conception that encourages the style of behavior that has characterized the European relationship to majority people. This conception is that of the cultural other, a being who is justifiably the object of missionizing, or of scientific consumption and manipulation, or of mass brutality. In either case, the cultural other is grist for the mill. She is material to be used. She is expendable. This web of interlocking ideological systems is the vehicle by which meaning is injected into European life. What they accomplish is the devaluation of people outside the culture. The essential characteristic of the concessions of the cultural other, however, is not merely that she is worth less than a European, but that she is worth nothing. The cultural other is a being who lacks meaning, whose existence has no human significance in terms of the European Intimawazo. The cultural other has significance only syntactically as a concept that assures Europeans of value in their own terms. Therefore, as a concept on which the Ultima Rojo thrives, and as a concrete object on which Europeans existentially act out their most destructive instincts. I do want to, before I go in, I forgot I was supposed to read a comment in the YouTube section. Sorry about that. So let me just go right there to right now. All right. So Alfred Booty says, I read something the other day on intellectual imperialism, meaning we are beholden to intellectuals and centuries who have monopolies of knowledge. We can't even educate ourselves to the level needed. And he says, decolorizing the mind is so important, like Franz Fanon says. Hillary Clinton is just as much an imperialist as George Bush. Look at how she was when she prevented Gaddafi from developing WMDs and chemical weapons. Mind you, he said he was ending the program. And actually, it's pretty interesting that Hillary Clinton is the person was behind, well, her and Obama were behind killing Gaddafi, right? Anyway, Europeans won't invade your nation only if you have nuclear weapons. Look at North Korea or India. The West will never invade because of nuclear implications. Libya almost had them. Cultural hegemony is a great idea developed by Gramsci, an Italian Marxist who was imprisoned. I love this book. We have some great black women out there. Okay. So thank you, Alfred, for that. Anyway, anybody else have a comment on what we read? Or what was read so far? Oh, let me put on a timer. Anybody have a comment?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so.
Because,
Oh, you said. Oh, yeah. No, that's,
because for me it's just like another iteration of her like analysis.
yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. I think that.
So yeah.
I think when we
So
talk.
basically, it's always behind like it's always the same principle. They have to objectify it for the control, the thrive of to control and to have power over, not to live amongst or like to share a loving relationship. They have to exclude themselves for the purpose of controlling and have power over like everything basically.
Yeah.
The new.
I was thinking that when we look into this, right? And by the way, I don't know if your phone cut off, but I was thinking that this is the summary right here. This is the summary, and we all recognize this. Oh well, we're religious, they're heathens, they must be saved. We know this, and this is the same thing Hillary Clinton was saying. And also, I want to just go back about the AIDS conversation that we were having. All that we were talking about when COVID first started was, why isn't it bigger in Africa? Why isn't it bigger in Africa? How come it's not bigger in Africa? Why isn't it bigger in Africa? And now it's kind of maybe, I don't know, but I stopped following the news to be honest, but now it's probably big in Africa. But that was the whole thing.
Now it's like the variants we have.
Oh yeah. The variants, it's like, oh, we have the South African variant, and that was more deadly, that was more dangerous, and blah blah blah. Like, this is what's going on, and I think what another thing that was really important was that if you notice where HIV and all that is settled or whatever, a lot of times it's significantly in South Africa. It's significantly in the westernized, western areas, or the places where white people have that control, that access, that medical. It's abominable, but like we have to, we should be informing our people about this. We I'm hoping, because I'm not going to be a part of this Christian debate, right? This Christianity debate, but I'm hoping somebody points out, what, these people are they have this stuff to say, look, the cultural other. It's there to create a cultural other. We're the Christians. You're the heathens. You're the non-religious. You need to be saved. And you need to go closer to what we are, our whiteness, this is a good book. And I mean, we're not finished yet, but I'm just going to be thankful that you guys pushed me to have this conversation, because I wasn't finna read it, I was like, I'm gonna take my sweet time, but it's a good thing I did it, because this is This is good stuff, you know.
Definitive. It's really definitive. I think, we've been kind of on track, but hopefully this book helps us refine all our weapons, make them a little bit sharper.
A little bit sharper. That's all we need, right? But yeah. So this is. I think this is a good summary. This is like this would be a good summary, and there are examples. But as far as like you could even look at this. Idea of progress. You say we're the modern, and the other people are backwards, and they need to be developed. Like just hearing that Hillary Clinton, because I'm kind of upset with the Hillary Clinton thing. Well, not upset, but like she was a front runner. She was whatever, and people wanted her to be president instead of Trump. And people were saying, nah, she's just an imperialist. And people were like, no, she's not, blah blah blah, or maybe she is, but she's blah blah blah. And it's like, yeah, it really is plain sight. White folk are the issue. The white culture is the issue, and unless or until we exonerate it, and I think that's actually something that we should do. We should actually do that because, and sorry, some people say, look, what about black? Well, not like how Tariq Nasheed make fun of it, but what about black on black violence, right? But like, what about the black people who are of these religions, and they do the same thing? What about black people who take up these European ideologies? They do the same thing. They go against the heathen, the non-religious, the immoral, infidels. They go against the backwards. They go against the primitive. They treat black people like objects. They treat black people like dirty, non-human. This is what's going on in Africa with our
exactly
people.
Like the example you had like last week about like the priest who made the church drink kerosene or I don't remember.
Yeah, gasoline or something. Yeah. You there? You cut out.
Yeah. That's all.
That's what it is. But it's like somebody was saying, because somebody told me, they said, look, this is something we have to be serious about, right? Nigeria, it looking like what's going on in Nigeria might be a second civil war. And they were telling me, look, they don't know how a second civil war is going to survive. They said the last civil war in Nigeria was 2 to 3 million people dead. They're thinking maybe 30 million. That's terrible, 20, 30 million. Now, I don't know. I hope not. But that's a huge number of black people losing their lives for no damn reason. And a lot of times, central to it, I don't know much about Nigerian politics. Maybe somebody else could. We don't have the time today. But the point being that, there's this guy in power, Buhari, Muslim. There's the Yoruba, not the Yoruba, the Fulani, Muslim, the Yoruba, maybe I think Muslim too, the Igbo, maybe more Christian or whatever. But the point being that there's this religious conflict, there are these, you're the blah, blah, they have the Fulani. There's so much animosity, so much negativity, so much, and people want to break apart, people want to have their own country, people want to feel, they don't feel like they're part of this country, they feel like it's Berlin Conference, blah, blah. Point is that at the end of the day, it's troubling, but there's going to be a loss of human life, and we're not even, a loss of African life, and we're not really so concerned about it. And partly because they are black. 30 to 40 million people, you know how many people that is? That's 20 to 30 million people, that's like half of the African American population. Right? Dead. For no reason. For a war that has nothing to do with any of us, that has to do with foreign policies, this is what's happening on our planet. We are disregarding, and we're disregarding ourselves from this European point of view. And I don't want to just say it's European, even though that's what Amir is doing, but we have to really come together. We have to take this seriously. It's not like we have to say to ourselves, look, it's not just this book, it's not just what's going on in America, it's not just whatever. There are real life consequences to the damage that these people have brought to us. There are real life ramifications that the Arab imperialists and the white imperialists, or the English imperialists and the French imperialists. In Cameroon, the French and you see videos of people killing babies, killing newborns, like shooting mothers with babies on their backs. There are so much brutality going on our continent. And it's not to say that we're backwards or whatever. It's to say that somebody came in and made it so that we no longer valued life. We no longer value black life, and this is a recurrent theme throughout our people. I never listened to Brother Polite. I'll tell you this. I never listened to him. Except for I saw one clip of him And I said, you know what, that's all right, decent. You know, where he said, if you look at a black person is more likely, in America he's talking, more likely to kill a black person than a white person, because that black person knows that there's no consequences for killing a black person, right? But also, I would add, it's because that black person sees themselves as a cultural other and sees that other black person as a cultural other. You know, and sees them as an object, sees them as black, and black is worse. You know, we call ourselves the N-word, not because it's something that we esteem, but it's because it's something that, unfortunately, the people in power hate. You understand? There's, I mean, and you know, some people might be like, no, that's not the reason. No, I don't care. You know, really don't care. Point is that we have to understand that there are consequences and that there's going to be, all over Africa. You know, someone was breaking down to me yesterday. West Africa might not have a good, with the exception of Ghana. They were saying, look, Cameroon has a problem. Togo has a dictator. You know, Cameroon is just messed up situation. Nigeria is you know, brink of civil war. Nigeria is a problem. There should be no reason that the people who developed and built and created civilizations should be having these kind of problems. But we are, and we have to take that into account. We have to put in the work, and this book is helping us, and we just have to keep going further. You know? That's all I would say on that. Anyone else have a comment on that? Or okay. Anyone else have a comment on that? Or you guys want to go to the last section?
No comment.
Okay. So yeah. So okay. Right. I don't know. Got a little too worked up. Okay. So sorry. So 42 is the logic of supremacy.
This section is serious, man. I'm like, you can't even read this all at once. You gotta read a small part, then come back, because it was tough.
Yeah, this was a beautiful section. I'm not gonna like the only reason why I only have one passage from here, because there was so many good passages. And I knew it was only had so many time. But then also I realized later that the next chapter is going to be universalism, so that's going to be fun as well. So we're just going to read the conclusion of this chapter. Like I said, people at home, if you want to read this book, you can download it. Like, there's ways to download it. You can come to my Discord, get it, or you can even just download it online. That's where I found it. You know, it's not too difficult. All right, so let's go to the conclusion. The logic of supremacy and destruction. So the relationship between European intercultural behavior and European behavior towards others is that the lack of love, sympathetic relationship for each other requires an other to absorb aggression and to allow a bond of identification to form between the members of the culture. Therefore, while power and racialism may play a part in the collective behavior of other cultural groups, only Europeans are racist by nature and because of their culture. This is so because they are the only people whose cultural asili is energized by the drive for power, because racism can be identified as systematic behavior resulting from xenophobia in combination with the concrete circumstances of power, and finally, because only the European ultima rojo is insufficient, it itself therefore demanding a cultural racial other to relate to. This combination makes racism endemic to European culture and defines the goal of white supremacy, European power over others, as the supreme goal of the culture. That is the statement that no other culture can make. African and other majority people are not passive victims of European aggression, and we do not intend to give that impression. History is as much the history of our forms of resistance as it is of the power of Europe, to say nothing of the long period of history before Europe came into existence as a cultural entity. But the focus in this discussion is not on other than Europeans, it is on Europeans themselves. This is not to say that Europeans have not been affected by the rest of us. In fact, part of their success issues from their ability to use that influence to further dominate those from whom it comes. From which it comes. We are concerned here, however, with the specific relationship between European behavior and the European ultima wazo, culturally structured thought system. In that regard, European conceptions of others become important. We are at present only secondarily concerned with the reaction of other peoples to European behavior. These reactions have only been infrequently discussed when they help to clarify some aspect of European behavior ideology. My ultimate concern is to favorably influence the rest of us in our capacity to realize self-determination, i.e., to eliminate Europe as an impediment to our progress and as the cause of our destruction. I believe that scrutiny of European culture will lead us in that direction. As Johari Amini says, it is our working definitions that are at the foundation of the ways in which we live. The European conception of the cultural other is such a definition. Clearly, all cultures define its members as different from those outside. That is part of what culture means. And this difference is a meaningful one, i.e., the members of our cultures have priority, are more important, emotionally closer than those of other cultures because of the things they share. Just as the members of the family mean more to us than those who are not included in the family. It is indeed part of the function of cultural definition to define a group in this way. It follows, then, that for any group there are the definitions of we and they, self and other, and for any group these definitions should carry with them behavioral implications. They are not treated the same as we, if only because they do not have priority. We come first. Even though this may appear to be logical, it is not, given the asili of African culture in which non-members are often given the same privilege as members. Job has remarked on this xenophobic African tendency. The European we-they dichotomy has implications that it does not have within the philosophies of other cultures, and the outsider, as defined by other cultures, is qualitatively different from the conception of the cultural other. The European conception of the cultural other is a unique product of European ideology designed to answer the particular needs of the Utama Rojo that houses an inordinate power drive. The outsider, as defined by other cultures, does not have the features of the cultural other. And a cultural other could not be conceived of in these other ontological and epistemological systems. In majority cultures, inanimate objects have more meaning, significance, than do cultural others for Europeans. The cultural other is not the same as the traditional enemy. She does not have the status of an enemy. She is less than an enemy. The concept implies the ultimate in dehumanization and devaluation. European behavior towards others is so extreme in part because their conception of the cultural other is so negative. Atrocities are no longer atrocities in their objects. If their objects are invisible, they become atrocities only because those on whom they are perpetrated have some meaning. The cultural other is significant only insofar as its existence creation is necessary for the maintenance of the European self-image in Utama Rojo and provides for the survival of European culture. It is the essential feature, asili of the culture that is revealed in the conception of the cultural other. It is this conception that services the needs of European cognitive strivings for power, supremacy, and control, all of which are basically destructive to the negatively integrative function of culture. By creating the cultural other as the proper object of those strivings, Europeans ingeniously use the power drive to keep their culture intact. This results in a culture whose primary rationale is universal supremacy. The culture has survived as a coherent entity because, as stated before, the Europeans' intercultural behavior has been effectively held in check by an ethic that differentiated between the European other and the cultural other. The tendencies of European behavior mandated by the asili are so inherently destructive that the cultural other is needed for their uninhibited acting out. There is no other Utama Rojo or self-concept that demands a cultural other. There are enemies, even barbarians, but not a cultural other. It is actually a deeply rooted European need. The asili demands it. The attitude is unique among cultural groups. It helps to explain a style of behavior that is also unique. Imperialism is not unique to Europe. Neither is power. But both the extremity of imperialism and the intensity of power enacted and possessed by European culture are unique, to the great misfortune of the rest of us. Europeans are not the most powerful people in the world because they are the smartest, as they would have us believe. The actualization of power is a function of the need for power as dictated by the Utama Rojo of the culture, its energizing mechanisms. Europeans need power as no other people do. The culture is so successful at gaining power because there is nothing within the culture that effectively conflicts with the achievement of power. What this description of their behavior has shown us is that anything goes. The power need is compounded by and related to the lack of a spiritual substratum on which to base a viable morality. Europeans, in a very real sense, have no spiritual community. There is a malaise inherent in the formulating asili and the definition of the culture, only now overtly manifesting itself in such a way that it becomes apparent to a tiny portion of its own participants. The pattern of European behavior towards others is inseparable from the European Utamawazo, and therefore the intellectual life of the culture. This pattern of violence, aggression, and destruction is not an aberration. Our study demonstrates that the asili mandates all three, and unless the collective cognitive and effective definitions change, that behavior will continue. And these definitions cannot change because of the nature of the European himself. All are parts of a coherent ideological whole. Ideology is, of course, implied throughout this discussion. but the final section of this study concentrates explicitly on European ideology and explores the critical themes in all European ideological statements. These are the themes that the concept of civility have brought forth. They have emerged from a discussion of European culture, using an approach that looks so consistently and coherently and coherence. It is not ideology above all that forms an ancillary or explanatory principles of the culture. The ideological substratum unites the various aspects and modes of the culture. The workings of the culture becomes crystallized as the relationship between ultima wazo, cognitive structure, ultima rojo, affective behavior, and ideology are made clear. So, yeah. What do you guys want to say about that? By the way, you guys think I could have done an audible on Yurugu? I'm just joking. Anyway, what do you guys think about that section? Are you guys there? Hello?
Yes, yes. Basically, this in this section, she's actually right. Like, they have this need. What picked up my interest is that, like, the Asili demand the cultural order to function because it's like starving for power, and thus it needs this order to exert this power and control over. And earlier in this chapter, she was saying something like, at some point, the Europeans became on code and decided not to attack each other, and that's when actually the concept of whiteness first emerged, and then thanks to that, they were able to grow in power and attack the other. So for me, it's an explanation to this.
Yeah. I like her description of progress. I guess I didn't read that section today, but people at home, know that she really stressed and emphasized progress as one of the fundamental ideologies of Wazungu. But and how they just keep driving about progress. I think even just going back to the Hillary Clinton thing. I know it's a good thing we played it, to be honest, right? But one thing about she's advocating for a transformation of the American economy, right? But she's not advocating the transformation of the American economy for any particular reason dealing with the American economy itself, but only because the cultural other, here the Chinese, right, are doing something. It's the only basis for her to advocate for what the top-down economy or the government subsidies of American industries is so that white power can continue to be ahead of non-white power. That's it. Her whole presentation was just, we have to be ahead of the cultural other. They are thieves. They are this. It's so amazing, right? Because again, remember Ani writes this in 1994, right? People look at the PDF, whatever. It's 1994. She writes this in 1994. Hillary Clinton wasn't even. No, I think her husband might have been president at the time, right? So she was the first lady, right, or something like that. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not too sure, right? But regardless, right? She's no presidential ambition. She's just in the background, blah, blah. And yet, remember, Ani's writing about what she's going to say 20 years later. Because it's a pattern. And if we're not exposed to the pattern, right, we are going to continue being duped, because the reality is that our people are being duped. When I put, like right now, when I put it up online, somebody did tell me, hey, blah, blah. But it's not just one person. A lot of black liberals, a lot of white liberals are saying, she's right. The cultural other. Chinese, yeah, we gotta move now. They don't know why they want to move, but as soon as she says, them dirty Chinese, they on it. They know how to rally themselves. They know how to get on code. That's how they get on code. We probably have to figure out how we get on code. What's our rhetorical ethic? To be honest, like if that's what I'm trying to figure out. I'll go into the comment section a little. Alfred said again, is voodoo considered black magic or black science? It's Hinduism. They have their own mathematics system and name for science. If blacks want to be scientific and mathematical, we might need our own words. And he says, embedded in English language are words and phrases that keep you confined to the European thought structure. There are new branches of mathematics called ontological difference from the paradigm. But yeah, that's what it is. The language of and voodoo and all that stuff. Like the reality is that we have to realize. I think this is what I've been saying, especially is that their culture is going to. We're never going to be a part of their culture. And this is the thing I want to say too, because I want to just expand on this Yurugu thing, right? Martin Delaney actually said, because I put this in my book, I'll be honest, right? In my book, I point out that Martin Delaney was talking about racism himself. And he was saying, I think that Europeans designed their cultures, right? They designed their nations around suppressing an indigenous nation or an indigenous population in their nation, right? So when you go to Europe, you're going to have, in certain countries, you're going to have the gypsies being looked down on. In other countries, you're going to have the Jews being looked down on. In other countries, you're going to have the Slavs being looked down on. Regardless of what country or if you're in Britain, you're going to have the Irish looked down. Like every one of these European nations had a minority population that they were had aggression towards. And of course, this is consistent with the cultural other things she's talking about. And what Martin Delaney was saying, this is Martin Delaney. Okay, Martin Delaney was in 1850, he was walking around a free man while Africans were enslaved, but he was, whatever, right? But he was a black man, right? He was like the first medical, like one of the first black medical students at Harvard or something like that. He's a big deal. Or, no, not Harvard, but one of the first black medical students, right? Point is that he's a big deal. And he's like, well, in America, they just do what people do for the gypsies and whatever. They do that to the blacks. But this is the way how they operate. They have a population that they are going to oppress and have this aggression against. They have that. This is how they do it. And remember, Ani's saying the same thing. Now, what Martin Delaney is saying is that it's not exclusively from European to non-European, because the gypsies are European as far as I can tell. The Jews are Europeans as far as I can tell. Right? And of course, they limit it now or whatever, but the point being that this is a part of, like what remember Ani's talking about is what is going on. Is a part of the system. They will have a cultural other, and if it's not a non-European, it would be a European. In Europe, where the non-Europeans weren't there yet, they were doing it against their own Europeans. They were doing it against the gypsies because they were like, oh, you're not the same. They were doing the Jews. Oh, you're not the same. So on and so forth. And then further, when now you have African migrants into France or into England, now they're concentrating, or Arab migrants, now they're concentrating on these people as a cultural other. White people are always going to have some aggression to something outside of themselves. If not that, they're going to have aggression against women. You know what I mean? Like if they're going to be white men and white women. It's going to be the case that they have this weird dysfunction. And for those people who don't know what Yurugu means, Yurugu is something that's just incomplete and doesn't have that complement. It was something in the Dogon faith that just didn't have a complement and was just incomplete and just had this drive to try to be complete, but they couldn't, and so they devoured the world or whatever. But the point is that this is what we're dealing with. And this is something that's universal, or this is something that's among them. The cultural other is something that they have that can describe them in a broader sense. Obviously not 100%, but 95. But I mean, that was the whole section. So if anybody has anything to add or anything, now would be the time. Like I said, otherwise, the last chapter and whatever after that, if you want to read anything after the last chapter, like whatever, go for it. I'm going to try to dig in from everything, whether it's the epilogue or whatever, and we're going to, and you can also read the notes You know what I mean? The notes that she left, it might just be a bunch of book references, but I want you to read that stuff. So it's gonna be in 2 weeks though. It's not gonna be in next week, but it's gonna be in 2 weeks, and I hope to hear from you guys then. But what are you guys' thoughts on this so far?
So far, so good. I think we need some handy references coming out of this discussion to share with people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. I like this is so. This book is so good, so accurate, and so needed. But it's like 1994, and as great as it was, we barely know about it. I mean, it's not the dominant discourse by a long shot. I'll just give some context for people who might hear this in the future. I guess recently, this is going to be a little bit gossipy, but Umar Johnson calls out this guy. Umar Johnson's a big Pan-Africanist today. He calls out some dating coach or whatever, or not dating coach, but some guy who's like a grifter, obviously, but
image consultant.
yeah, okay, this guy,
Kevin
Samuels. Yeah, so Kevin Samuels is like he gets women to come on and he kind of disrespects them, whatever. And Umar Johnson calls him out. That's what's going on in the conscious community right now. Before that, there was this ADOS thing. The ADOS is just some, nothing of importance. This book right here tells us who we're dealing with, gives us an important, critical way of looking at other people, gives us a way to dissect other people's things, dissect how people were speaking, whether it was Biden, whether it was Trump, whether it was Clinton, whether it was Bush. This gives us a powerful tool, and we are not using it. And what's going on in our community is just two grifters complaining about the grift. Complaining about the hustle. Don't even make no. Don't the phrase is "don't knock the hustle." That's all they're doing, knocking the hustle. They don't know. I don't know why they're hustling. They're hustling and knocking the hustle. That's where we are as a people. We have to get up. There's an image that goes if like the image of people, white folk with it's like a map of the world, and they're whatever, and the people, but the map is on top of a table, and the table, but it's not a table. It's black people crouched over, so it's their backs. They're huddled over, and on their backs are white folk playing like playing the game of the world, and the image says if we just stand up, we'll topple the whole system. This is what we have to do. If you're listening to this program, obviously, like I say, like, subscribe, share. Definitely go into the other programs on KWZ Radio because it's grateful. I'm grateful that I can be a part of a network of intelligent individuals, and just do that. So definitely go inside, see what they were. Obviously, Bitter Medicine Podcast, obviously Harsh Reality Podcast, obviously Queen Council. Just reach out and just add to the profile in a sense, right? But other than that, this is where we are, and we have to go further. Because there's no reason for somebody to write a book this good 30 years ago, and yet we're still playing games. Doesn't make sense. All right? But anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Thank you for listening at home. Thank you for the comments, James and Alfred. Thank you for that in the YouTube chat. Thanks for everybody who does the likes. And of course, I'll see you all in 2 weeks. And I appreciate your time. So, anybody else have anything else to say?
Thank you guys too for going through the book with me.
Okay. Thank you so much. Shamim Hotep, everybody.
Hotep. Yes, indeed.
Okay. All right. So.